Science and history shows Papua New Guinea is amongst the first in the world to plant its own food. Agriculture has long been the backbone for Papua New Guinea, but commercial agriculture now, the topic of the world in terms of agriculture, technology, research, all of these places are a challenge for farmers here in Papua New Guinea. A forum hosted by the Farmers and Settlers Association hopes to bring together everybody in Papua New Guinea, those concerned in this space, to deliberate on the best way forward, looking at the challenges and charting the way forward. My guest in the studio, Mr. Wilson Thompson, the president of the Farmers and Settlers Association. Sir, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
All right. Sir, the Agriculture Department has encouraged exports here in Papua New Guinea, agricultural exports, but the agricultural production here in the country has declined over time.
Yes, the agricultural production in the country has declined not in the last few years. We can't blame any government, but it has started probably even before 2002 when we had the Grand Chief Michael Somare, who announced in his government in 2002 the export-driven economic policy, as well as the green revolution that was to deal with agriculture. Because they realized that agriculture production, although we say that that's our foundation and that's our backbone, the government then realized that there was a problem and there was a decline in production. Basically, if you look at it, by 1980 or 1985, we had coffee that was grown mostly by the 5 Highlands provinces and then the 2 Mamase provinces. And at that time, we had 2 million people. But then they produced over 1 million bags of coffee. But today, after, if you come back to 2002 or 2005, 20 years later, the population of the country has increased to, by the time it increased to 6 million people, and coffee growing provinces have expanded from the traditional 5 to almost 10 or 12 provinces, and now they've gone up to almost 16. Population is increased, that means the labor has increased, and then we have the provinces that has increased, that means the land that's made available has increased. But then, and then we've got money that's been pumped in has also increased, but the production has declined, that's in coffee. Likewise in cocoa. And tea we used to have, but now we don't hear about tea because it's mostly grown in Jiwaka only by carpenters. The one that we had in Garaina and the local other plantations and the smallholders, it's gone. The tobacco industry in Medan and in the Eastern Highlands, we don't have it anymore because it's gone. We used to have factories producing processed tobacco as well as cigarettes, but we don't have them now. It's been imported. So that's basically what happened from 2002 up until now. Most of the commodity crop production has gone down. So we really need to find out what is happening. And around 1991, when we had this bougainville crisis, much of the problems that came affecting the agriculture sector was the bougainville crisis. That's where affected the country, and most of the banks, they wanted the money back from the industry, which in those days we had many plantations, copra plantations, cocoa plantations, tea plantations, coffee plantations. So the bank wanted the money back, and most defaulted on the loans. So most of the Papuan Guineans that the government assisted, in 1970s the government gave the plantations back to local Papuan Guineans. And then in the 1980s, the government also did a massive 10-hectare blocks in coffee, cocoa, and copra. So they went through, they surveyed the land, helped the locals incorporate the businesses, whether it's business groups, ILGs, or companies. And we had loans given by the NDB and PNGBC at that time. And we had, the government even established a National Plantation Management Agency to go out and manage, help the locals manage these plantations. And then we have the Plantation Management Training Program, which the Department of Commerce and Department of Agriculture and Livestock, they had these trainings located at Woodall, Sipik Agriculture College, Highlands Agriculture College to train all these Papua New Guineans. But then that's when I think the decline started. That's around 1991, 1995, when the banks started, they wanted their money back. So that's when the companies or the plantations and the blocks could not repay their loans.
So I think, Mr. Thompson, it was in that era that things were starting to look bad for the agriculture sector. Well,
I would say that would be the case because in those days, like if you go to Gulf now, there's cocoa there, there's copra there, there's coffee there, but there's no buyer. In those days, you had the plantations like Ben's Phillip plantation that was buying rubber, cocoa by steam ships. And then you go up to Sogeri, we have these plantations that were buying. So the locals were selling to the plantations. So the buyers were already on the ground. So like if you go to the highlands like Jiwaka, you have Wagi Magden, there were a lot of plantations that were buying the coffee and tea from the locals. But when they stopped, then the tea growers, they don't know where to sell because there's no one buying. Likewise with coffee, like even in East Islands or even Moresby, they used to produce cocoa and copra. But now if you go down to Moresby, you hardly see the plantations like a 10-mile going up to Nawai and all that. So the people are still growing, but where do they sell? And that's the problem. Probably that's the start of the problem where we don't have this production coming into the statistics. So there's copra, cocoa, rubber grown in Gulf, grown in Oro, grown in Millen Bay. But who's buying them? Because when these plantations collapsed, the buying points also went out. So the people are still, we still have coconuts, we still have rubber, we still have cocoa, but who's buying them?
Very true. Now look, great discussions there. We'll hold that thought. We'll come back after the break with more of the discussions. Welcome back. You're watching Infocus. My guest still in the studio, Mr. Wilson Thompson, the president of the Farmers and Settlers Association. Now, sir, before the break, we spoke about the production levels of our exports still on the decline. Some suggestions of when all this started to go down, and markets, especially here in Papua New Guinea. How do we create these markets? Policy, legislation, where is the answer?
So with the markets, especially at the international level, the demand is, we still have a very high demand for our agricultural produce. For example, like if you talk about coffee, the outside world wants 2 million bags of coffee. And at the moment, we are not, it's gone down from 1 million bags. Now we've gone down to almost 650,000 bags. So it's decreasing while the demand, it's increasing or it's static. Like they want 2 million bags. Now we have demands like the Minister for Agriculture and the PNG delegation that went to Dubai. There's demands coming in. That's very good for the country and the prices would be good. And we support that. But at the moment, we just need to get the bags of coffee coming up, just likewise with cocoa. So we can supply them. That's not a problem, but the production is not there. We don't have the production. The demand is there. For example, like honey. In the past, we used to have only one company from Austria, not Australia, but Austria. They buy 150 tons per annum. But now, we've got demand like in Australia, elsewhere, they want almost 200 tons of honey, or even 400 tons. But at the moment, the production in the whole country, it's just below 70 tons. So the demand for honey, it's there. So if you go to the shelves, in the supermarkets, if you're in Manus, you can't see the PNG honey. If you are in Sipik or you can't see it. Probably you'll see it in Ley and Port Moresby.
Yeah.
So the demand for our products, it's still there, like coconut. They still want our copra plus also the oil, that's the virgin oil.
So, Mr. Thompson, it's like we have to first make it accessible to our local market before we give it out to the rest of the world.
Of course. Even like honey, the country wants it. They want about 100 tons of honey. That's apart from the outside market. So even 100 tons, we're not producing it. We just need to increase that. So at the moment, we are at about 70 tons. So like livestock. So we've got a very big demand here for beef, but we can't supply it because people want to eat locally produced beef, which is probably cheaper. So like in the 1990s, we used to have 150,000 heads of cattle or 150,000 cow. But at the moment, at present, it has dropped down to 45,000 cows that are in the country. So even we have the oxen palm factory here or the Globe in Medan. We are importing because we can't meet the demand. So these are the issues that is confronting us. I mean, it's also affecting our food security. Okay. So like tea, we've got the best tea that's grown, but it's not much. It's coming out from the carpenters in Jawa County, and the other tea plantations have gone bush.
True.
And yeah.
So, Mr. Thompson, I've been to the highlands recently, and I've seen some of these coffee plantations now overgrown. You're familiar with coffee in the highlands. What are some of the reasons why we are seeing production low and people not attending to these coffee, plantations like before?
We got, like I said, in the 1990s when the banks started calling the money in. Some it was not necessary with the banks, but it was a management issues, like they were on a conflict and management issues. And then most of the plantations, they've gone bush. And you've seen them that nobody is picking them. But that's the issue that we are trying to address, is that why don't we go, the plantations, this is thousands and thousands of hectares of state land. This is a state lease. Not only coffee, but you can see cocoa, even coconut. There are still thousands and thousands of hectares that are there. But the production, what is produced there, the coffee is it's ripe, but it's falling down to the ground. Coconut, it's falling down. Rubber, it's good because you can't, it doesn't go bad, so it's still in the tree. But with cocoa, it ripens, it falls down, but nobody is picking them up. And that's the solution that we need to look at, because at the present time, the smallholders, and that's why you are asking this question, the smallholders are almost 80% of the agricultural production is coming from the smallholders, individuals that are out there. And mostly, like I've mentioned, the cocoa, it's coming from East New Britain, and then now Bougainville has picked up. ECPIC is coming up with the governor bed that's introduced some reforms there with the minister supporting it. We've seen increase in production in cocoa coming from ECPIC. But if you go to places like Oro, million they produce cocoa, but who's buying it? So this is the problem. And like coffee, like Western Province, they've got almost everything from coconut to cocoa, but only rubber has been bought because we got a good not-fly rubber company.
All right. I think before the break in the first segment, you spoke about, the theme from the state going to Dubai and marketing our products there. Why don't we bring them onshore? Do you think it would be a good idea to bring these investors onshore, people to do business, come into the country, bring the millions of dollars into the country, do business with us in our home territory? Would that work?
Yes, because we've got a few companies that are still doing production, apart from the plantation sector that they have collapsed. We've got a few companies that are still producing, like in Jiwaka. We've got carpenters, they're still growing tea and coffee. If you come into Central, we've got Galley Ridge that's still growing rubber and coconut. And then you go to Egmark in East New Britain, they're still doing cocoa. And we can bring them in, and there's a lot of the thousands of hectares of state land that's still available. Like if you go into Central Province, from Bautama, you go down all the way to part of Rigo, whole of Rigo.
Rich fertile land.
And then you go all the way to Abao. It's all state land, and you see they call it Coco land, Morogwina, Upulima. The rubbers are there, and then there's still thousands of hectares of state land like copra plantations and all that, even in Rigo. And then if you go up Laloki, and then you go up to Berena, there's still thousands of hectares of state land, but we need to work with the locals. How do we work with them and then bring investors in? There must be some investor confidence.
Yeah, very true. We'll take a short break now and come back on the other side with more of the discussions. Welcome back to Infocus, discussions on agriculture and livestock here in Papua New Guinea. Now, Mr. Thompson, before the break, we spoke about some very interesting analysis of what's happening here in the country. In terms of concepts moving forward, what do you think about the concept that NBPOL is using at the moment, where they just go and buy from the blockholders, the producers there? Do you think it will work for the others in the agriculture sector as well?
Yes, it's still a plantation sector that was introduced, but the palm oil did better, probably because they were located in 2 or 3 provinces. Probably that's the reason. We need to find out. I think that's the theme of the conference. Probably we have to find out what was the theme, because we had the oil palm plantations, but those were only localized in West New Britain, Oro, and some few in New Island. But they were attached to the block holders, and also smallholders came in. So with them, probably the province is something that we need to find out, and especially the management of those blocks. And they had some agreement. I think that was to do with the management and the concept with the oil palm, because the smallholders and the block holders were tied into the plantations or the factories, the processing part. But in the case of the other industries like rubber, we had block holders in Upulima, in Moroguina, up in Murua, up in Gavian. And we had rubber buying plants there, processing plants, but it was operated by the government, by the Department of Agriculture and Livestock. So probably that was the reason why the factory has collapsed, or like the one in Moroguina, Upulima. It got bent, and no one is operating. So these are lessons that we can learn from on New Britain palm oil. These are the blocks that the Department of Agriculture established, as well as the smallholders that came in, and probably it's the management of the scheme that continues to make it a success story today. And it will be interesting when oil palm now goes into Morobe and Medan with New Britain palm oil, that is both of Makam farming in Morobe and Ramu sugar in Medan. And I've seen people growing oil palm, and how that arrangement works with the current in a new province, unlike West New Britain and
it's also been grown in Milne Bay as well.
Milne Bay, it's on a plantation on large scale. And how it works out in Morobe and Medan, is that a concept that's been done in the other provinces? Is it going to work in these new provinces where other plantations have failed? Like we've got cocoa and copra in Morobe and in Medan, some of them are not operating. Is this oil palm going to do something? And this is the focus of the conference, because some of these are running like oil palm. We've got the president of the Palm Oil Producers Association will be presenting on the oil palm experience. And likewise, we've invited the president of the Poultry Industry Association that covers mainland holdings, Jineg, Lihir Farms, and this Israeli farm up there. There are some lessons that we can learn from them. So with the industry associations also representing the sector. So it's something that we are looking at. And there's some plantations that are currently operating. We've got a few nationally operated plantations, like we have in North Flat, the rubber. It's like a cooperative that's still running since the 70s, 60s, and probably the Octedi company that's providing assistance, and probably it's the management.
So what you're saying is, one thing that works in one part of Papua New Guinea might not work in another part of Papua New Guinea. Obviously, we are diverse in many ways, but of course united as one nation. The conference that we're having this week, I understand it's a 3-day conference, is happening here in Port Moresby, and we'll talk about commercial agriculture. We've talked about agriculture, but now in a commercial sense, moving forward. These are some of the things that we will be talking about. There are good companies who have come on board to actually supported you in doing so.
Yes, we've got good sponsorship. I mean, we have to acknowledge that times are tough, and we've got support from companies like Jineg, Chemica, from Fresh Produce Development Agency, Oil Palm Industry Corporation, Water PNG, and Moresby Resource Holdings, and few other companies that are coming on board to host this conference. But the important thing is that we want to find solutions. Like we've mentioned, we've got 80% of the production coming from smallholders, and we've got 20% coming from the plantation or the blocks. So what is that thing that we want to achieve? We can't do away with the smallholders because they'll be here. And customary land is there, and we can't do away with the commercial farming. That's like we've got, like in Genec chicken, we've got Mainland Holdings, we've got New Britain Palm Oil, we've got Galley Ridge, we've got Carpenters. They're still running plantations and processing. We can't put them off, but then what is that good mix that we have to find? So are we going to use the oil palm model, which is successful in certain parts, but even in the highlands, you'll be surprised that we've got a few plantations that are still running, owned by individuals or even by expatriates. Yeah. And you think that plantations are going in central, but we still got few plantations by locals, which they still not, it's not up to the kind of expectations. They're still struggling. But we can learn from them. And something that we want to encourage, so we want to find out is that even in the smallholder space, like if you go to drive down the road going down to Rigo, you see the hot sun. And you have the farmers there. We're telling them, we are giving them a spade to dig during the hot sun. He can't even 1 hectare. It's too much. He'll be taking 1 month to dig. So we should be encouraging why we are saying commercial farming or commercial agriculture is that, look, times have changed. We have to move. And even if they are smallholders, they're small people, we can tell them that, look, why don't they, we got DAL operating there, or we got some cooperatives there, or plantations. Tell them, look, buy the tractors and, slashes so they can dig all the grounds for all the farmers there, and then the smallholders can come and start planting. But at the moment, if you go to Makam or Ramu Valley, or even up on the coastal, you go to East New Britain or East Peak, we're telling them to plant, and then we're giving them spades to dig 3 hectares. It will take 3 months. So we're losing time in production. So the demand is out there. If you want to take advantage of that, we have to tell them, look, use tractors. If you want to use, cut down coconut plantations and plant new coconuts or rubber, you can't be getting an axe and cutting them. Those have gone. We have to tell them, use chainsaws so that you can cut the whole rubber trees that have, it's almost 50 years old. You cut them down and plant new ones. But if you give an axe to the farmer, you tell him to cut 10 hectares, it will take him almost a year to cut down the whole rubber crop, likewise with coffee and cocoa.
Very true. I mean, if you look at it, he has to feed his family at the end of the day. So while he's wasting his time cutting down the tree, he would have gone to the market, sold something, made some money back to his family. So very good observations there. Mr. Wilson Thomas, the President of the Farmers and Settlers Association, thank you very much for joining us on the program, and we wish you all the very best, not for you and your association, but for the rest of Papua New Guinea in terms of agriculture and livestock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, this has been In Focus. If you have comments on tonight's program, you can email us on the email now showing on your screen, or you can engage with us on our social media pages. As always, from the team here, stay safe. Bye-bye.